What's going on, everybody? Welcome to You're Not the Audience. This is a weekly live show where I break down brands, products, and subcultures that stand out by not appealing to everyone. I'm Calvin, creative director at Parliament, and Parliament is a brand transformation agency that helps brands when they're facing big changes, and we help them kind of get to the next stage of themselves through strategy, positioning, identity, all that good stuff. And it is super exciting to be back. We didn't do a stream last week because we had our big annual golf tournament. So I'm trying to only sneak in so many fun side things every week. But structure for the episode today is our normal thing. We're going to talk about some sci-fi stuff. We're going to start with some recent news and obsessions, and then we'll just do some deep dives into some sci-fi books and movies and what it can teach us about branding. I think this is going to be a really fun, nerdy day today. So, how's everybody in chat doing? Did everybody bring everybody do their homework assignment of bringing some kind of sci-fi movie to talk about or a sci-fi book? Because I think we'll be able to get into a lot of them today. So, yeah, super excited to be back. I feel like I've been spotty the last couple weeks with like holidays and whatnot. Parliament's been doing good. We're staying busy, maybe a little too busy. It's summertime is getting hectic, which is great. Love it. Feel lucky and privileged to have a busy agency right now in this world. So let's just start with some fun news stuff. I guess this isn't even news. This is just our recent obsession at Parliament. So last week, I've definitely talked about it on stream a lot because I've been excited about the stuff we were doing for it. We did our annual golf tournament called the Caddyshack Invitational. I've got some stuff to share with you all. So we did it last week. We are definitely not golfers. So it's always a very fun event. Takes all day. I don't know, there's like 20 of us, different people from Parliament and friends. All go out, take over a golf course, golf all day. We're terrible golfers, but we always have lots of fun. It's a good excuse to day drink and just hang out with friends. But we always design up fun stuff for it. And this year, I've definitely talked about, we had the illustrator Brett Parson reimagine our mascot, who we named Bugs Bogey. And so we had to make some swag with it. So this is just a Figma board I'm showing you right now of just some like, what'll probably end up being some social stuff that we put together for it. So of course we had to do koozies, some shirt designs. Help, I shanked my balls at the Caddyshack Invitational. Very classy. You'd see good old Bugs Bogey here. Some photos of the crew. So, oh, Sarah already brought up Dune. Oh yeah, we're gonna talk about Dune today. There will definitely be Dune chat. So yeah, all this stuff's turned out really fun. I think we're gonna put up some at least some posts on Instagram about it. But the shirts turned out great. Bugs Bogey slamming his golf club. It turned out really good. None of us got too sunburnt. It's been hot and spicy in Portland. So I love how these turned out. We need to do a big run of all these stickers for everyone. So turned out great. Friend of Parliament Kyle, he was a pro golfer. This is the first year where we've done these golf tournaments many years, and this is the first year I haven't come in last place with our team. So I mean, that's something, right? But so yeah, so that's Caddyshack. It turned out great. We'll probably do another one next year, and probably make even more swag for it. So a bunch of t-shirts and koozies this year. That's like the fun stuff to make always. Yes, Jared said be the ball. You gotta be the ball. Everybody asks, why did we choose a rabbit for the mascot of the Caddyshack Invitational? There's not really a good answer. The true answer is that we are huge fans of CSA images, legendary vintage ad stock photo website, and Charles Anderson there, if I remember right, makes so much amazing stuff. They had a great photo or a great image, this old illustration of a rabbit golfing, and we were like, that's it. And so that's just how it accidentally became a rabbit. And so we're just continuing the tradition with like Brett Parson, who is an illustrator of Tank Girl and all that stuff. He did the new version of it, and we love it. So Bugs Bogey, forever a Bugs Bogey friend and fan. So maybe we should do Bugs Bogey tattoos this year. Yeah, Aaron's in the chat. He said many bogeys. We did have many bogeys. Aaron, CEO of Parliament, Aaron Noah, last place with his team. Sorry to call you out, Aaron, but when our CEO, you know, gets in last place in a golf tournament, you know we are truly not a corporation of golfers. But, okay. Should we get into it? Should we talk about some sci-fi stuff? Let's talk about some sci-fi stuff. I think that's it from Parliament. Aaron, is there other Parliament news I'm supposed to be sharing? I can't remember. It's been hectic. So, let's talk sci-fi. How do I want to start this one? So we've talked a lot about the like worlds of sci-fi already in this live show. We've talked about Wipeout, legendary video game with all of the design by Designers Republic. You know, that's like a racing game, but it's not really about racing game. It's about corporate sponsorship and the proliferation of that. So I think that's kind of where this initial idea sprang from. So let's start talking about what sci-fi can teach us about branding. I think the reason I really love sci-fi specifically in this relationship is that I think sci-fi and the best brands don't really accept the world as it currently is. They all propose a world that could exist. And I think sci-fi stories are really just about building completely fictional settings, which we've talked a lot about world building on this live show. And that's exactly what that is. It's about building your fictional setting for your brand. But what sci-fi stories do really well that I think that all brands could learn from is just starts with this, the idea that if this idea is true, or if this fact is true, or becomes true, what would happen? What else would become true? So it's just a really simple idea of like this one little nugget of like change, truth, whatever it is. What happens when you extrapolate it into infinity, and how does that affect your brand, your world? And you see this in sci-fi stuff all the time. Do I have any stuff to share today? I guess I've got some stuff up. Let's pull some stuff up. So when you think about it in terms of sci-fi, sorry, you're just getting wiki pages today, not thrilling. And apparently they don't have very exciting cover size images here. So you get stories like Left Hand of Darkness. It's big, giant, almost like, you know, by Ursula K. Le Guin, one of my all-time favorite writers. It's almost this like space epic, but it's really just about like, what if there wasn't fixed gender? And like, what kind of worlds would be created? What happens when outsiders come into that world? You've got stuff like Hyperion, legendary, absolutely legendary sci-fi book. That was kind of, you know, it just asks this simple thing of like, what if humanity is the only thing that, or what if humanity can only be saved by AI, or maybe killed by it? But that's kind of the setup, maybe relevant to our current world. You've got stuff like Handmaid's Tale. We all know the show. Everyone's seen the show, right? But the book is incredible. And this is just like asking the question of like, what happens if fertility problems like affect our world? I mean, specifically, it's like, what happens if fertility problems led to a religious fascist state? You also, we all know, like, Children of Men, that movie, great movie. It kind of asks the same question of, like, what happens if children just stop being born? Sci-fi and post-apocalypse scenarios like that share a lot of similarities. They ask a lot of these similar kind of questions. So you've got great stuff like that. We'll talk more about these, but I think all these things, I mean, the challenge with connecting sci-fi to branding is that these are all pretty dark subjects. I mean, sci-fi tends to be a critique of our current state of things. I'll probably talk more about that later, but these all really do show like how just like one little small change in our world can extrapolate into creating a completely new world. So that's kind of the idea that I think really starts translating over to brands really well and is helpful for us to think about how we can create new worlds. And so the idea that every new world starts with just one small little tiny change. So, you know, a new world for stories, for brands, we see this one small change. That's kind of like, you can always think of that as like, maybe it's your brand's one key differentiator blown out to its most extreme inevitable end. And I think it's like kind of helpful to do that in general with whatever your key differentiator is with the brand, because maybe it's a good thing at the end, maybe it's a bad thing. So I think this is a really great trick for imagining the ideal. Like, what is that very specific future you imagine for your story, for your brand, for whatever it may be? So it's just like another little then nice branding trick that comes out of this, I think, is the idea of, instead of asking, what do we sell? Which, I mean, selling's important. That's why we're actually in this business. We want to sell things. But instead of asking, what do we sell? You could ask, what do we believe is, or like, what future do we believe is coming? And I think that's when you start extrapolating out to that, you can find how you connect to that future. So I've already kind of like talked about this, but all of these little small changes that I'm talking about always start with the idea of like, what if? So anyone in chat, think about this with like your favorite sci-fi things, your favorite brands, like the ones that are really strong usually ask this question of like, what if blank? And sometimes asking absurd questions like that, where you're the annoying child that just keeps asking what if, asking absurd questions like that's a great way to find super exciting brand stories and big ideas for ad campaigns. It's a great engine for imagination when it comes to creating ideas for ad campaigns as well. So ask what if about everything relating to your brand. That opens up a lot of stuff. Like right now we're working with a client named Netlify. They're really great, cool, smart people. And they do this kind of like, they handle a lot of stuff for the web, but essentially what they are is like, they're a web platform where you can use AI or code to create anything for the web. And essentially anyone create it. So you start asking the question of like, what if every person on Earth could create for the web? That starts imagining a world that's really, really different from the one we currently have. And so, you know, but in that example, like some of those coding companies might be asking like, what if coding by hand no longer existed? For outdoor companies, what if the outdoors became uninhabitable? That's almost how the Patagonia story. For beer brands, it's like, I don't know, something absurd. What if water no longer existed? How, like, what kind of brand, what kind of ad campaigns would come out of that? So always start asking yourself what if questions to really push towards some like absurd, yet obviously like really truthful take on your brand. And if I start just like dripping sweat during this talk, that's because it's like hot and muggy in Portland and gross. I have a tiny little fan going down here that's doing the Lord's work, trying to keep me cool. So if I'm just dying at the end of this and look like I'm in a sauna, sorry everyone. So that's, I think this is like a really, really key and just fun exploration of like, it's a different way to look at brands. We often try to be like, oh, what are we selling? What's like the main selling point of this product? That's great. But I think if you started imagining, or if you start imagining new futures based on this one small change that your brand is adding to the world, I think you get some incredible ideas. Like, and I mean, you know, all these things ask what if. I talked about Left Hand of Darkness, ask what if gender wasn't fixed. Margaret Atwood also wrote a book series. Margaret Atwood wrote Handmaid's Tale. She also wrote a book series called Oryx and Crake, where it just asks like, what if biotech companies were able to start engineering life and it explodes, they take over governments, all kinds of things. Dune, Sarah mentioned Dune in here. I mean, Dune is about a lot of things, but Dune is just like, what if we fought about oil in space? That is really all Dune is about. The whole setup is like spice is oil that also gets you. It's also a psychedelic. That's what Dune is, and so everything blows up from that one question. Severance, the TV show, that asks, what if we could truly separate work from life? Severance is great sci-fi setup, like just so sharp and simple. What else? Gattaca. I know Sarah here is a big Gattaca fan. I mean, Gattaca just asks, like, what if DNA could predict crime? And you start extrapolating all of that out there, and it's great. But then how do brands take that? I mean, the one that we all really know that I think was they've maybe stepped away from it a little bit lately, but I think is still great, is Nike just asked, what if every person is an athlete? I think that's such, like, just believing that everyone is a fucking champ and an athlete who can overcome anything is such a powerful idea for a brand, actually. It's so I think it's great. Liquid Death we've talked about a lot on here. They ask, what if water looked like a metal band? Which is just, I love it so much. I've been obsessed. I think I realize I've just been on like Handmaid's Tale this whole time. I'm too excited talking about all these things. Actually, because I think another one that I've been obsessed with, this is my obsession. I know I've brought it up here. Let me throw up Hyperblast, the new caffeine-infused beverage. Let me see if I can find this somewhere. Here we go. This is the stuff. So I have become obsessed with this brand, Hyperblast here, which is a new beverage created by the agency Tavern that's basically like Four Loko. And their challenge is just like, what if jet skis were the coolest thing on Earth? Which, not saying that they're not. Like, that's literally what they've talked about, like, in all of their branding for it, is just like, what if, like, there was nothing cooler on Earth than a jet ski? Like, and jet skis kind of, like, ruled the world. And they just, like, doubled down on it at their, like, event activations. They've got, like, guys in full, like, racing gear, like, they're jet ski racers, and they created this whole other world of brands around it. Incredible. So, I mean, and there's like a lot of other brands that do this. I mean, we could list them off all forever. Oh yeah, Jared said, this is someplace, vintage VHS packaging. Yeah, they really nailed that with the Hyperblast look. Like, it's just, somehow they made the 80s and early 90s look way better than it ever was. So pretty. You know, but like other brands do some like kind of absurd things that I love. Like Warby Parker asked, what if you could try glasses on online? That was the thing that made them different than everyone. It seems absurd. Lego even was like, what if you build the toy? Like, that's actually an insane idea when you think about it. Like, the pitch for that is like, oh, it's the kids' jobs to build the toys. Like, we just give them the pieces. Oh yeah, Fuel in the Tank. Ryan, super fun branding. Yeah, the Hyperblast stuff. Dang, it's so great. But anyway, so I think the thing that works like really great about all those different elements is like they ask these what if questions that start undermining the thing that you think are standard within their category. Like water always has to look clean and pure, and Liquid Death was like, fuck you, no it doesn't. It can look like a heavy metal band. And like, and it can be gnarly. Like all those things, like those what if questions start leading you to like undercut everything we think we understand about a category and actually upturn it. And so that's probably the biggest insight, if you want to call it that, from this whole thing. Maybe we'll talk about that at the end. So the thing that what if question does too is that it then asks, or just, it helps construct a world that isn't realistic. And that's what great brand worlds really do. They start constructing this world that's not realistic, but by doing that, it gets to some kind of deeper truth. So realism isn't the goal when you're asking these questions, but believability is. you know, when we start imagining this world, that's the basis of all world building in brands. We've definitely talked a lot about in here. All world building is just creating enough rules that the whole premise of your absurd new world is completely believable. So, you know, and the more you kind of start following that unique premise for your brand, the more believable your world becomes. You know, you think of like, there's always the joke about like Steve Jobs' reality distortion field when he would give presentations. And his trick was just that if he spoke consistently that like something was magical, we all started to believe it. Like he would say magic, magical, automatic, all of those words enough that we start believing that he is kind of almost like, I don't know, some magician of technology, when really he was just a very smart asshole. And I think that's the thing, is that like people, the reason you can go really deep on that absurdity is that people forgive weirdness. Weirdness is okay, but they don't forgive inconsistency. If in one thing you're trying to say it's magical, but then no, it's, don't worry, it's totally practical, and like all this kind of stuff, that inconsistency always creates a problem. So the reason that I like thinking about that kind of like idea that like you want to construct a world for believability, not necessarily realism, not to reflect the real world as we all understand it, is because I think when we're imagining a future, specificity is kind of the most important part. You know, when you imagine companies in a sci-fi setting, we oddly know those companies as characters. There's like Weyland-Yutani from Alien, which is this like evil corporation that's once all alien secrets. There's stuff like that. Or like when you think of Neuromancer, that book, Neuromancer created the idea of cyberpunk, basically. I think, oh my god, what's his name? Gibson, who wrote Neuromancer, which, oh, I'll show, I'm actually, while I'm talking about Neuromancer, I'm going to pull up one of, it has, the Neuromancer covers are some of my favorite covers for any book on Earth. This is just a, let's just do a quick little aside. So this is Neuromancer. I mean, even the classic cover, pretty good for its era. So Neuromancer came out in 1984, set up the whole idea of cyberpunk, basically the idea that, you know, Blade Runner came out of this, everything that we think of where like corporations have overtaken, Neo Tokyo, all of those kinds of ideas, we're all going to have implants. But I mean, this Neuromancer asks like, what if data and information became like actual geography and actual worlds? So Neuromancer's great, but let's look at the Neuromancer covers. They have a ton of awesome ones that you've probably seen before. This one I love. So good. Feels very not standard sci-fi cover. Great. Love this. And this one, I'm totally blanking on the artist who did this, but this cover is so cool. I follow this this illustrator on Instagram, and just awesome style. I think this is like the Brazil release of the book originally, if I remember right. So anyway, Neuromancer, William Gibson, who wrote it, I think was like, I feel like this guy understood, I feel like he understood branding better than most brand strategists. He like infused that whole world with such like heavy branding and corporate speak, and that's why cyberpunk got into this like, everything in cyberpunk sounds like you're reading gibberish because it's so heavily branded. Oh, Fuel in the Tank, Ryan said, Dune Raised by Wolves, also sort of relevant for brands. What if AI becomes a new religion? How do you align yourself and what happens next? Yes, absolutely. Yeah, Raised by Wolves, dang. Raised by Wolves is a great show. And that's like kind of, if nobody saw it, go watch it. It's kind of set in the Alien universe. And I don't know, was it based on a book? Ryan, let me know if that was based on a book. I can't remember the story of Raised by Wolves. Oh yeah, this is someplace. Jared says, sucks it was canceled. Yeah, it definitely ended a little bit rough, I remember. But, I mean, that was great. Yeah, it's like, you go to a new planet and like what happens when these AI robots kind of start creating their own culture on a planet. Okay. Anyway, back to what was I talking about now? I got too distracted by Neuromancer. It's incredible. But I think all of like Neuromancer is a great example of like get so insanely specific that the whole world becomes believable no matter how absurd it is. Like Neuromancer and cyberpunk worlds are like absolutely infused with like technology. People are like receiving implants. Everything's fueled by drugs. Insane worlds, but they get so specific that I think we can all, as branders, learn something from it. Okay, yeah. Ryan said I don't think it was a book. Okay. Should be though. Somebody has probably written a bad like the TV show to book thing. But I think this is okay. So like one thing that all of these do, I mean, Raised by Wolves is a great example. What if AI becomes a new religion? That's kind of what they're challenging there. All sci-fi, at least what I think of good sci-fi, speculative sci-fi, that's my genre. The Ursula K. Le Guin's, the Atwoods, you know, they're always about critiquing the present. And I think brands can also critique the present. And I think that's kind of what they should be doing. So the thing is that's like, it's kind of feels like a little bit of a killjoy take for a brand to do that. But I mean, the world can always be better. And every speculative sci-fi story kind of believes that. They usually paint it in like a negative sense. So I think a brand can kind of spin it to a positive sense. But, you know, it's like the criticism is that like cyberpunk Neuromancer, it's not about computers and drugs. It's about capitalism. Atwood wasn't really writing about religion in Handmaid's Tale. She's writing about like the fragility of human rights and democracy. Wipeout, our favorite racing game, you know, that wasn't about cars. That was just about like corporate advertising and sponsorships. That happened to be in a really, really great game. And so I think, you know, we can start thinking about, I guess the way to think about this is like a good way to critique the present is, first of all, stop thinking about trends, stop responding to trends. Those aren't the presence in the sense that we're talking about, and start thinking about how your brand can critique the world and imagine a better one. I think if this is a thing that we do all the time at Parliament, we often challenge clients to write a better vision statement for their brand. Most vision statements from brands are utter bullshit. They're like, we want to be the best or something like that. And we usually challenge them to be like, no, you exist to do this and change the world this way. We like to make sure that it's also a measurable thing. Like, I don't know, we want to make $1 billion by this day. But it should be by imagining a better world. Like, that measurable thing needs to be in combination with something that actually changes the world. Even the smallest brands, I think, have some effect to like change the world at some point. So once you do that too, if you're like, hey, Patagonia believes that like, what if a brand could save the world? That starts doing this thing where like the best brands create belief systems like that. And so you're not buying Patagonia, you're buying the belief that you are changing the world and you're improving the world when you're buying Patagonia. Like that is like a sci-fi ass like setup if I've ever heard one. It's certainly a what if situation. So, you know, we've talked a lot about world building in this. I think that's kind of like what that belief system is. When you start filling out that world, when you start adding all the characters into the McDonald's world, you get the Hamburglar. That's your belief system right there. So to create that believable world, your brand needs to create the rules that define it, what's inside of your world, what's outside of your world, and then just ruthlessly stick to that. That's that thing I was talking about earlier, is that inconsistency is the problem, not weirdness, not absurdity. And those beliefs that you then get into start defining your messaging, your aesthetics, the aspirational qualities of your brand. You know, if you're Patagonia and you say, what if a clothing brand could save the world? That starts really, really defining everything that you believe and everything that you put out into the world. you have to stick to it. So yeah, I think that's when I don't know, I think it's just like a really interesting challenge, because I think there's something happened, I feel like, in branding at some point where we all got like a little bit too cynical at some point, and we stopped believing that the things we could do that we do could really affect the world. Maybe this is like the challenge of marketing and branding in the social media age, where it feels like everything is just a blip. But I think if you kind of take every brand back to that point and say, how are you changing the world? Like, what if this? I think then you can actually do some pretty strong work. It's just really hard to get past that cynicism, I know, that we all experience now, of like everything moving so fast. We're just kind of like, every little marketing moment is like a tiny little blip. So I think the more you can create that deep, believable world, the more all of those little blips start stacking up and meaning something more than they are. Okay, what other, before I continue rattling on about these things, what other sci-fi stuff has everyone been paying attention to lately? I mean, let's talk favorite sci-fi books and movies. I mean, I think the best sci-fi things ever are basically every book cover of like a 70s and 80s sci-fi book. That's just already the best sci-fi. Just go to your local like used bookshop and find all the section with your old used 70s and 80s. That's all the sci-fi inspiration you ever need in life. Oh, Jared, the Omni magazine covers. Let's see those. I'm gonna pull those up. Dang, yeah, those are incredible. If anyone hasn't seen these, so Omni was like a sci-fi magazine from, oh god, help me out, probably late 70s to late 80s, something like that. I don't remember, but they had this like so much beautiful, just surrealist sci-fi covers. Like, I mean, this stuff is so good. I mean, and just the fact that all of these things were created when nobody was, yeah, this is November 1979. Nobody was making this in Photoshop. There wasn't an AI making this. It was all just, you know, probably some nerdy illustrator with an airbrush. This is definitely also like the old paste up person in me. Like, I did paste up in my youth, which, for those that don't know, if anybody here doesn't know paste up, that's when the old school way of laying things out, where you would like essentially, even in the digital age, where you'd like print out things, put wax on the back of the layout, cut it out, lay it out on a larger sheet of paper, then photograph it with a giant camera, and then that's the film negative that's sent to print. Like, doing paste up on these things is crazy. Like, it's like little stuff that now is so easy, but you see this like cut out in the Omni logo up here. Like, all these things had to be like cut out by hand, photographed. Incredible. Yeah, dang. Jared, that's a good call on Omni. I think I saw some covers in like a vintage, they had like a few copies of this in a vintage store I went to recently. So, I mean, my favorite, probably my favorite sci-fi movie, this is, yeah, you win, this is great. My favorite sci-fi movie is good old Alien, very first Alien, probably my favorite sci-fi movie. I mean, it's sci-fi horror. I'm not as big of a fan of Aliens. I know that's a, you know, hot take. I don't really care for Aliens. But just the look of the original, like, Alien poster is great. And the way it comes on screen. Oh, Jared, fave premise Firefly. I actually don't know Firefly very well. I feel like that's probably a major... I definitely have seen it, but I honestly don't remember a lot about it. So maybe I'll have to get re-educated on Firefly. But yeah, Alien is great. Even the way, like, Alien, the way they... For anybody who's watched the Alien movies, like, the way they always do the title screen, where, like, the letters just build in slowly. They're just blocks, and it just kind of builds in slowly over a dramatic shot. I think it's so good. I can't believe how good the first movie in the series was, and then how bad every movie is after it. Sorry, everyone. They're fine. They're great movies. They're fun, but just by comparison, dang. Such a good little premise in that one too. Yeah, Firefly is basically a space western. Yeah, I think that's why I initially liked it. I don't know why I didn't follow up. I love westerns. I've got a soft spot for cowboy stuff. So I don't know why I didn't get more into it. But my other obsession, I've already talked, so I won't oh, there's someplace Jared says breakdown of the design of Alien. Yeah. It's great. But yeah, I think, like, my other obsession, sci-fi obsession, has been the video game Marathon. I'm not gonna annoy everybody about Marathon again. Nobody's playing the game, but I am. I think it's great. Go play Marathon. Incredible game. Some of the coolest looking, stylish, sci-fi aesthetic you've ever seen. I don't know if I could say... Maybe this is part of the challenge of Marathon and why it isn't, like, a huge, massive success, is because I don't know if I could actually say what its, like, what-if statement is. It's, you know, you're like... Okay, here's the world of Marathon. I'm gonna nerd out with everyone around. So, a colony of people was set up on another planet. They all go missing. But then for some reason, you start sending people, these robots that are imbued with, like, people, like the spirits and souls of people inside them, down to the planet to then check on what's going on. I guess it's a corporate cover-up story in the end, like all sci-fi things. There's always some corporate overlord that's doing something bad. But okay, that's great. All right, note to self: watch some Firefly. I think that's gonna be my homework from this. So, Jared, check in on me later and remind me to watch some some Firefly. Oh, just 1 second. I have to close my office door. My dog escaped. Okay. My dog was hanging out in here. I don't know why. I guess maybe she likes it because it's like I'm in the hot, stuffy part of the house. Yeah, Ryan, Fuel in the Tank says Alex Garland's sci-fi niche with devs and Ex Machina. Yeah, I think that's that movie-wise, that gets into some of my favorite, those, like, sci-fi when it feels small. Like, one of my favorite examples, it's a good movie, but one of my favorite examples is the movie Signs, where it feels like you're almost kind of, like, witnessing a one-room play where this, like, sci-fi thing is happening around it, where you're stuck mostly viewing the world from, like, one viewpoint from within the house. You don't get that big, broad, like, epic view of everything. It feels like you're really just, like... Ex Machina does that in a great way, where it's like, this crazy story's happening, where there's obviously a whole world happening outside of it. That's that, like, world-building and believability aspect. But you're mostly witnessing it only from, like, this one little viewpoint. And I think that's always so good. And that's what Alien did, really. Alien was actually a pretty small little movie, and somehow it eluded, like, when you add in things like the aliens, the Weyland-Yutani Corporation, when you start adding in all that stuff, it builds this idea that the world is much huger beyond, like, whatever is happening just in this tiny, small story. I think that's absolutely what brands can do, where you just, like, focus on your one little thing, put tendrils in your story that lead out to other things. You know, focus on that truth, whatever that weirdness is, and go with that. Yeah. It makes it feel relatable when it's more intimate. Absolutely. So, okay, so I guess this is probably just some like final thoughts on sci-fi talk. Like, you know, most companies use branding to explain who they are. And that's kind of, I think, just branding at its core. It's the way a company expresses itself. But I think the one thing that we can learn from a sci-fi story is that it begs your brand to ask the question, if my company changed the world, what would that world look like? And I think if we, like, this is actually enough of a thing I've been thinking about lately. I want to start integrating this into some brand strategy work more. Specifically a question like this, because I think if you say, if my company changed the world, what would the world look like? You start immediately cutting out, I think, a lot of the bullshit that comes up of like, well, maybe we have to say this, maybe we have to say this, we've got to appease this. I think you'll get a much clearer line towards like what that like really, really deep truth of that brand is. And I think one way of then looking at your brand and making sure that you're like differentiating yourself in an interesting way. So maybe this is a question that comes before that one, but this is a challenge to every brand, is like, what if the, how do I phrase this? What if the most basic assumption of your brand's category is wrong? I mean, that's what we've talked about with liquid death. The most basic assumption of that brand category, water, is that it should be pure, it should be refreshing, it should be like clean, it should always be all this, it should be light, airy. And Liquid Death was like, no, it is a dirty, gross, heavy metal brand where you go to the extreme by drinking this water. Like, that's an absurd premise, and it works. And so when you start challenging whatever that like most basic assumption is beneath everything, I think that's when you start getting to interesting areas. We talked about Nike. I mean, it probably doesn't seem like a revolutionary idea anymore. But just the fact that Nike's like vision of the world was that anyone can be an athlete, it inherently is like goes in the opposite direction of all other fitness and all other athletics-based brands, where like those are like, there's always an inherent elitism to most fitness stuff. Maybe not like elitism isn't the right term, but there's inherently gatekeeping, because it's like, in order to do this fitness stuff, you have to be fit, you have to be like overcoming, you have to be doing this. And so when you twist it to be like, nope, everyone can do this, it's like actually a pretty big change in the way they view the world. So undermine that most basic assumption of your category and try to change one thing that everyone else thinks is permanent, and the rest of the world will probably follow you. I think that's kind of like, that's probably like at the core of this idea of like what I think we can learn from sci-fi stuff, is that like it is always challenging one standard, one understood traditional viewpoint about something. So you turn that tradition on its head and you can start building a whole world from that. And I think if you go deep, the only thing is like, when you're imagining that world, when you do that little twist of that standard, you really have to double down on it. You have to like build that whole world and consistency all from that. Because if you're inconsistent, everyone will be like, oh, this is bullshit, they don't really believe this. So you have to paint that picture for all of your customers, all of your fans. I think that starts getting into kind of like peak aspirational brand territory. So I think that probably covers enough of my stuff. I'm going to look back through my notes. Is there anything I'm missing? I mean, now I just want to talk about more sci-fi stuff. All right, this is the always this is the shame and embarrassing part for myself when it comes to sci-fi stuff. How do folks in the chat feel about Star Wars? Because I've always been a little bit indifferent to Star Wars, and I feel like that makes me like a bad sci-fi fan. But maybe it's just because I've witnessed what they've done to Star Wars. I feel like the thing about Star Wars too, you know, we're in this era where I feel like oh yeah, Ryan, Fueling the Tank says my first sci-fi love, but getting bored of it. I think there's also just like, I don't know, maybe this is probably another big deeper conversation, but there's definitely been maybe some kind of like death of cultural criticism or something. Oh, Aaron says, how is Luke Skywalker the protagonist? Yeah, Luke Skywalker is a very funny protagonist. He's not really the most thrilling, but I guess maybe that's what makes him good, is he's just kind of like, you know, he's learning and you're learning along with him. But I think, you know, there's kind of been this like thing where sorry, speaking of like death of like cultural criticism, you know, there's been the jokes about like very like far right fascist friendly political thinkers, you know, love like Rage Against the Machine or something like that. It's like how there's a whole slew of people who don't realize that that Star Wars is a deeply anti-fascist story, and so I think like somewhere along that kind of got lost. And I mean, it's the same, like I love Warhammer, games of Warhammer, and the like main characters in it are terrible. The Space Marines, they're like, it's a complete fascist dictatorial like intergalactic government that's like taking over and killing everybody on every planet. And but you're like, there's a lot of guys in that space, specifically guys who are just like, they're the good guys, and you're like, no, this is satire. This is, so I think maybe that's what's happened with my love of like things like Star Wars, is that like it got ruined by maybe some of the fandom or something. Yeah, it says great, but too many spin-offs and starting to fall flat. They're hit or miss. Yeah, I haven't watched most of the recent stuff for Star Wars, so I'm behind on it. I did play more nerd talk. There's a really good trading card game, you know, in the vein of like Magic the Gathering, that's called Star Wars Unlimited, which I think is an incredible game. Great artwork in it, very unique artwork. I think it's actually worth looking at just for that, because well, here we have the means. Let me see if I can find some stuff. They did really interesting artwork in it that I think was I think for me that was the big standout in it. They did a much more like graphic illustration style that I think was really neat. But the game, I think, is actually incredible. Let's see if I can find some good imagery of cards here. So you can kind of see in here, they did this really cool, a little bit more comic book style, but like super graphic. I think it's really interesting what they did. Definitely more unique in the space. It was like a lot of people either loved it or hate it, but I think the card game is great. I think it's one of the best card games ever made, but I just can't get into the Star Wars theme enough to care. I actually just sold all my cards off for it, so. But I think that was actually, it's funny, like them doing, like the idea of putting out a trading card game. This is branding talk here. Like the idea of putting out a trading card game is just insane. It's like so expensive. You have to sell millions and millions of copies of it in order to make any money. And so like, and all you have to do to differentiate yourself really in the end is like, obviously the gameplay mechanisms, but like the look of the cards. That's truly it. Like that really, and like how interesting people, or how people relate to the like stories that those cards tell. And problem is with Star Wars is like, for most people, that story only goes so deep. So, okay, you guys are all talking about Andor. That's the thing I need to watch. Oh, sorry, I'm gonna put Firefly to the side, and I'm gonna watch Andor finally, because everyone keeps saying Andor is this great like rebel story. So, okay, I gotta watch it. Dang. That's what's coming up next then. I love it. I mean, it sounds like, yeah, it's like very, like Andor's like pretty revolution minded, which maybe we could use a little bit more in our life these days. I do think that's like one thing that sci-fi does that I think more brands could do is accepting that like the world is inherently political. Like sci-fi challenges that, like, I mean, it is always cultural critique, and it always inherently challenges the present and how we do things. Yeah, Ryan says it feels like an extremely relevant show to be watching right now. And I think brands could like stand to like actually accept that branding and advertising, like, those are inherently a part of our political landscape the same way anything is. Like, I think there was just and I think it was Jared, this is someplace in the chat, who turned me on to it. There was just what's face, Ian Anderson from Designers Republic just gave a talk. It was like a Zoom meeting thing, and I'm bummed because I missed it, but I've seen some clips come out of it, and like asking him if like design is a political practice. And it was really fun to hear him talk about it, because he comes up from like this like very like working class British background, and so he has this mindset. It's like, if you weren't worried about politics, it just means you're a little too posh. And because like the politics are happening to you whether or not you like it or not. And that's kind of the way he approached all design and branding, is that like it should all be propaganda for something. Like that's what it is. Like it is inherently like you were putting something out with a political statement. And it's like the classic question of like or the question of like, can art be political or art not be political? But maybe that's a whole other, maybe that's a conversation for another thing, of like the politics of art and design, but I might not be smart enough for that one. We'll see. But all right, well, I think that's time to wrap it up for the day. It's almost 1 o'clock my time. So yeah, that's just kind of like a reminder. When you're starting to work with a brand, whether it's like new brand or rebrand, start asking that what if question. Oh yeah, Jared, this someplace says Segmeister's next month, so sign up. Yeah, Segmeister's doing that chat. I absolutely can't remember. If you can, drop a link in chat or something for that. Because I totally forget the guy's name that's putting it on. Legendary advertising guy who's doing the interviews. Totally blank on it. Yeah, so remember to ask yourself when you're working on brand stuff, ask that what if question, and think about how you can undermine and like undercut that really basic assumption of your whole category. I think those are two fun challenges. Next time you're working the brand, do that. What if, and what's kind of the most basic assumption of that category, and how do you undercut it? So I think that's good. All right, next week, I'll be back next week again. I had to it's been a bummer. I had to skip weeks last couple weeks because we had holiday stuff and other events going on. So I'll be back next week. Don't exactly know what we're going to talk about yet, but it'll probably be something fun and nerdy. That seems to be the way it's going with me. So, yeah, I don't think there's any other last things. I'm trying to think if there's anything we need to. We just had some I mean, this is always our reminder to on the Good Old Parliament website. I just am reminded because we got like a new big email blast went out today that kind of like basically we send an email blast out, I don't know, once a month, something like that, every couple weeks, that's like encouraging people to go read all our insights blog, which is actually great. It's much smarter than I am. So go read our insights blog. That's usually coming from Chris, our founder, and Aaron, our CEO, are usually posting things up on there. So great thing to check out. There's a new one that just went out today, but I'm not going to tell you about it. You gotta just go look at, see what the most recent thing is on our insights blog. Go check it out. Yeah, awesome. Fuel in the tank, Ryan. Thank you so much. Appreciate you having this chance. Appreciate you guys for coming. You guys are always great. You're always tossing in good stuff in here. Oh, good. Jared's gonna, this is someplace, gonna toss in a link to those chats. That's good. Throw it in here. All right, everybody. That was an amazing time. Somehow I just moved my camera. I'm on it today. All right. See you all next week. Thanks a bunch. It was great.